a little bit of work to get here, but we really appreciate it. So I'm going to start us off and pray. So, Lord, I'm just so thankful that I have such an amazing team that I get to work with. We're so excited that we get to pour into kids' lives and just teach them about you and get them excited about learning who you are and having a relationship with you. I just ask that you would be with us here during this time of training and that everything that needs to be said would be said. In your name, amen. All right, so like I said, I'm so happy you guys are on my team, and I'm not just being like, oh, thanks for being here, but really, I really appreciate everything that all of you do, whether it's leading a small group or the game or doing sound. I cannot do all of that by myself. Literally cannot. So I really wanted to thank you guys for being here. I know things get crazy, and especially if you get trained on a Sunday morning, we can miss a lot of things because Sunday mornings are really hectic. So we wanted to have a training to go over training procedures, plus things have changed since we graduated 13 into our class, and we only graduated out 5. So I'm sure some of you have noticed the dynamic is a whole lot different with more kids and a lot younger kids. So we're going to go over that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a check-in procedure. I'm pretty much going to go through a Sunday morning in the exact order that it's done and what the expectation is for each section. So you guys all know this. First thing that you need to do is there's this top portion that's often covered by the clipboard. Write your name that you served. It happens, it gets missed a lot. I miss it a lot, but it is important for us to have a record of it. So we have one person at the check-in. We put the check-in desk outside because it helps us keep control of which kids are in and not getting kids that are going out. So parents come up, especially if they're members, they kind of know the drill. We know the majority of the parents. Make sure you welcome both the kids and the parents. It's very important to do that. We are ministering to the whole family. Yes, we are kids church. We hang out with kindergarten through 3rd graders, but we are ministering to the whole family. So make sure that you're greeting everybody. If there are extra kids that haven't gotten dropped off at their other classrooms yet, greet them too. It helps make them feel special. We love everybody. So the one thing that I've noticed that we all have a hard time with is doing the check-in correctly. As the worker, you are the one who writes down their number. Write it down legibly. Because if we have to go get a parent and we're trying to figure out if somebody wrote down a 9 or a 4 and we guess wrong, we're going to get the wrong parent. So that's a problem. So make sure you write it down. Make sure you put it in the correct column. If it's the 9 a.m. service or the 11 a.m. service. I guess it's actually 9:15, even though these still say 9:30. There is a Seeking Him column. Sunday morning, when we don't have Seeking Him, no one should be in the Seeking Him column. We have had that happen a lot because most often parents just aren't paying attention and they just pick a column and write the number in. So the other thing that's important that we need to be filling out, and I know it can be difficult, is when we have guests. But again, if we can make sure that we get their information legibly, that's a huge help for us. Yes, they do get checked in at the check-in desk, but if they're a returning guest, they don't always go back and check in every Sunday. So we need to make sure that we know who's checked in correctly. It helps us keep track of everything. It helps me when I'm prepping for lessons because 2 weeks ago, we had both services. We had over 20 kids in each service. And that's a lot. So, and then the next week we had, I think like 15 and 18 the next week. So it's kind of hard to guess how many kids we're going to have, but it does help us track. So, are there any questions about check-in? Yes. We all do. It's kind of a habit. We're not in a really good habit of doing that. So we want to get better about that. So it may be easier if instead of having the clipboard turned out for parents to do it, if you have it facing yourself. That would help you remember it. You know, a lot of times we are handing them the number. So if you see a parent coming down the hall, just prep it already. Pull the number out, write it down for them, turn it so they can sign it. That'll make it a lot faster too to get their kids checked in. Anything else? No. Great. Okay. So that takes us to the moment when kids walk in our door. So you guys know we have really fun lights that we usually have, nice bright colors. We've got games out. The creation station is set up. The other element of that, hi guys. That's okay. I'm just glad other people are here. Hey, it happens. I just went over the check-in procedure, so you guys are not too far behind. So the other element we have is the game setup. Ideally, if we're fully staffed, which we are getting a whole lot closer to being fully staffed every week, which is very exciting. Ideally, you're going to have a person at each spot. So you're going to have somebody at the creation station, which means you're making stuff or you're helping a kid make stuff. If nobody's there, draw a picture. Invite kids to come draw with you. Right now, they all love paper airplanes. I cannot make a paper airplane to save my life. But you know what I can do? On Saturday night, I can Google how to make a paper airplane. And I can try my best, or I can find something else to make. So if you're already doing something and you see a kid come in and you invite them, if you're already doing something, they're more likely to join you than if you're just like, hey, how's it going? How's your Sunday? Because especially for this 9:15 service, they're all really tired. I know how it is getting my kids ready to get here on Sunday morning, and there are some Sunday mornings I feel like we have barely made it to church, and we have to be here, so there's not an option. And some of the kids that we have, their parents serve, so they have to be here. Doesn't matter if they were up till midnight last night because they had something else going on. So sometimes we do have kids that are really, really tired. But if we are full of energy, and even if you're not, there is coffee in the foyer, we usually have bagels, you can fake it. And that's okay, because the moment you start pretending you have energy, you'll find that you do actually have energy to do it. So be making something at Creation Station. We always have the games over here. Have the games set up and ready for somebody to just join you. They're usually back here playing their own games or whatever. Make sure that you're looking for kids who are new, because it's really scary, especially if we have a lot of kids in our room for that day, to come into a room and you know no one. You don't know what the day is going to hold. You don't know how it's going to go. So be on the lookout for kids that are new. Usually, myself or Joe will make sure if we have a new kid to pull a worker and let them know, or to have a kid come over and introduce themselves so that they're already feeling like they're in the mix. So make sure that you're looking for that. A lot of times we will have kids who are our regular attenders who have had an off morning. Usually what I do is if I see that they're just kind of by themselves, or they're sitting down, or they're just kind of looking down, I'll go and I'll chat with them, ask them how they're doing. Sometimes they still won't say anything. Give them another minute, come back and check on them again. Sometimes they just need you to check on them a couple of times. Sometimes they're just really tired and they'll tell you, and they just want to hang out and sit for a few minutes, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that we have everybody participating. The other thing I do want to note is whenever possible, if you notice we have kids who need a buddy, try to make sure that they're included in whatever the group is doing. It's really easy because they have a one-on-one. It looks like they're already doing something, but we want to make sure that they are included with other kids. So whether that's including them in a game that you're playing, they may not be playing it absolutely correctly, but that's okay. Or inviting them over and having them draw. Whatever it is, try to get them included in the group so that they're not just hanging out just with their buddy, because that's not what we want. We want everybody included. So we all know what comes next after our welcome time. We put on our great countdown. We now have fireworks that go off at the end, which the kids are really excited about. That makes them very excited. I think Cotton did that for us. Thanks, Cotton. They've been asking for an explosion or fireworks or something dramatic to happen, so they were really excited for that. Make sure during the countdown that you're getting the kids to help us. A lot of times right now, the kids, as soon as they see the countdown, will leave the games or leave Creation Station and just sit and wait. The countdown time is for them to help us get the room ready for the next thing. So that means if they're playing a game, have them help you put the game away. When you're putting the games away after they've put all the pieces in, go ahead and move them from the floor back to the cabinet because we are having to use so much of the room space when we do stations again, especially when we have 26 kids. That takes up a lot of space for 4 stations. So we want to make sure that we do go ahead and put the games back in the cabinet so that we do have more floor space. Creation station, at this point, because we're using it for the craft station, it does need to be completely cleared off. The other thing to make sure is, because we have kids that love to create and draw, and sometimes they think the craft, for some reason, they just don't like it, make sure you kind of tuck creation station away, not right under the table, because we will have kids that if they don't want to do the craft, will go in and pull out their own papers and just do their own thing. So then we have the welcome time where I get up on stage or Joe gets up on stage and we just welcome the kids. If we have a really quiet group that day, make sure you're excited when you're sitting in the seats. Make sure you're sitting down in chairs next to kids. You guys all usually do a really good job of not bunching together, but make sure that we've got, you guys know the kids that have a hard time being quiet and sitting down. Usually it's our new kindergartners. And I have one of those kindergartners, so I can tell you exactly which kids they are. But make sure that you're positioned. If you know there's a kid who's always super wiggly, sit next to them. Because sometimes all they need is somebody to help remind them to settle down. So we're going to ask them what they did that week, how their week's going, if there's a holiday coming up, if they have any plans, if anybody made anything at Creation Station. And usually at this point, they all have like 5 paper airplanes each. So we have like 100 paper airplanes on any given Sunday, I feel like. So remind them, too, after they've shown us that their creations need to go under their chair. Because they will fidget with them. I have seen paper airplanes fly during worship. It's not what worship time is for. So after welcome time, going over the rules, you all know our Give Me 5 rules, we do worship. Ideally, 2 or 3 people up here on the stage leading. We usually have kids that want to come up and they'll be right up here on stage or right below the stage to do worship. If we've got 2 or 3 people, having the rest of the workers out with the kids worshiping is really helpful. We have a lot of kids now who want to sit or want to talk or play games during worship. And a simple reminder that it's not playtime, it's not talk with your friends time, it's worship time. I don't mind if kids are sitting as long as they're worshiping. Sometimes you do need to encourage a kid to participate. I'm notorious for going over to Jasper and grabbing his little hands and making him do the hand motions. And he doesn't mind that. He's also my kid, so it's a little different. But just encouraging them, whether you're sitting next to them and you're doing the hand motions while you're sitting down with them. We do have a couple of girls right now who like to go into the back and worship. We have one girl who just loves to dance, and that's great. And she, she's really worshiping. We also have a couple of girls who like to go in the back and play and jump and spin because it's fun. So there's an element of that I'm okay with because they're learning that they can worship in whatever they're doing. But just paying attention to when that's obviously just turned into playtime and remind them, okay, hey girls, we're worshiping right now, we're not playing. And then they usually will, have no problem and they'll come back and they'll worship. We have a lot of kids who are really tired, so they want to lay down during worship. We don't want that to happen. Because as soon as we have one kid that stretches across 4 sets of chairs, they all want to do it. So we want to encourage them, even if they are sitting, that they're participating in some way with worship. After worship, we used to have prayer groups. We're moving prayer groups now to be a station. Because we're having so many more kids, we needed an extra station. Plus, it gives a little more focus to prayer time. We're also going to create a prayer wall where we'll have a spot where they can write down things that we're praying for, and we'll also have a spot for praise reports. So especially if we get a move of prayer from one that we're praying to over to answered, we'll make a really, like, I don't know how we're gonna have it look, but make it a really big deal so the kids know this is something that we were all praying into that happened. God answered that prayer, and we want the kids to realize that God does answer our prayers. So we're gonna make that really fun. We're hopefully gonna actually be putting it on the back of the partitions. So we'll get to have it be really big. So in the morning when we get in on Sunday morning, we'll just turn the partitions around. So that we'll have our side, and then at the end we'll turn it around so that when youth group's going or any of the other events that go on here, they don't have to see our prayer wall. They'll still have a clean room for them. So that'll be really neat. Lesson time. Few things we really need to make sure. I know it can feel like the kids having their own Bibles becomes a distraction in it, but the reason we have the kids get their own Bibles is it's putting the Word in their hands. When we have them flip to where our Bible story is, it's getting them familiar with where the books in the Bible are. We keep talking about doing some different things to help them learn the books of the Bible. In the meantime, while we're creating that, at least when they are flipping to the story, they can recognize, oh, that's in the Old Testament. Oh, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. They're starting to get those things, and it is really important because, yes, like most people, I have my Bible on my phone. I used to know all the books of the Bible in order, even the minor prophets. And now, because I've been using my Bible on my phone, they're really fuzzy. So if I'm actually trying to flip through or remember, it's a little difficult. So having the kids have a physical Bible, we really do feel is important. Help them find the books of the Bible if they need it. Some of the kids can't read, but if you notice, they all want to find where the story is located. So as quickly and as quietly as we can help them do that, let's do that. The other thing I really need help is paying attention to kids who are starting to talk or fidget with things or push each other or just be a distraction, because it can be really embarrassing for them if I have to call them out from the stage. And we don't want that. We just want them paying attention. So be paying attention, looking for kids who are getting distracted. And honestly, all it takes a lot of times is just you putting your hand on their shoulder, because they know exactly what they're doing. The other thing we need is you to be excited about the Bible story. Yes, we have all heard the story of Jonah 50 times. Definitely a story I could tell in my sleep. But there is always something that you can get from the story. I love that I am spending so much of my time in the Bible in the kids' version of the Bible. It sounds silly, but there are so many things that I am catching that I didn't see before, because it's just being said in a different way. Rachel and I work together, and we are continually talking about how there are pieces of these stories that we didn't realize were in there, or these little lines or these little verses that just stick out. So pay attention for those. I know we're serving, but there is usually something. I would say every time there is something you could learn from the lesson, even if it's just re-solidifying who God is, how big He is, that He's the one who fights for us. It's just going to reiterate it in your spirit, and that's huge. So react to the story. When Jonah gets thrown overboard and the storm stops, that really is amazing. We have no idea how that is. So if you react, the kids will react. Now, obviously, you don't want to turn all of the attention to yourself, but react to the story. If something scary happens, like Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, be worried. Not loudly, but enough that kids will realize that you're engaged with the story. Because if you're engaged with the story, they'll engage with the story. The other thing is, a lot of times I will ask the kids questions. Give them time to answer the questions. If they're obviously getting off track, or they're notorious for, I ask a question and they'd realize I'm picking on people to answer, and they just want to tell what happened during their week. So we want to help them stay focused. So if you see that's happening, go ahead and raise your hand to answer the question. If they're they're on track to answer the question correctly, but they're having a hard time getting there, go ahead and raise your hand and answer the question. But don't be the first one to answer. This is their lesson time, so we want to make sure they have the opportunity to learn. What else? Was there something else about lesson time that I had listed? I felt like we talked about. No? Okay, so stations. I only teach for maybe 10 minutes so that they can get up and move. So you all know, if you're here, you're going to lead a lesson or a station. All of our stations support the lesson. We usually have a craft, a game, an activity, or something that looks like a small group, and then now we've added our prayer group. So we really want the kids to really reinforce it. So I'm going to start emailing you guys. Yes, email. So check your emails every week if you're serving. I'll email you the lesson and the stations. I'm not going to necessarily assign what station you'll work in the email, but I want you to be familiar with all the stations. Because if you're serving, you're going to be leading. Because this is your guys' class too. Like I said, I cannot do every single thing in this class by myself. So I want you guys to really rise up. You guys are teachers. You are leaders. We go over that when we talk about in our rules about listening to the teacher. I'm always pointing out, you guys, even when you're sitting down, because you are the teachers and you are leaders in this classroom. So you'll either be leading craft, the game, the small group activity, or prayer time. So be ready for that. In prayer time, these kids are great. They almost always have prayer requests or praise reports. But you may get kids, especially since they're broken up, that don't want to say anything, that don't have any prayer requests, that they're just tired. If that's the case, then just pray in regards to what the lesson is. We've been going over a series where God is acting in really big ways. He's saving people. He's acting miraculously. So pray that they would see God as their protector. Pray that in situations where they're scared, that He will show Himself to them, that He's keeping them safe. Pray that they'll see miracles, that they'll get to witness those things. Because it can be hard when you've got a group of people that are just sitting and you're like, okay, who has a prayer request? And no one says anything. You just hear crickets. You may literally hear crickets, because occasionally we get crickets in this room. Like that one day we had that really loud one. So just be aware. You know, if you have something in your life that you can share with them, maybe you have a trip coming up. Say, hey guys, well, I have a trip and I just want prayer for us to have a great time and be safe. You can share your prayer requests. Obviously, age appropriate. If there's something really hard going on, you may not want to share that with the kids. But please make sure that you're sharing it with us. We have prayer time every Sunday morning in Adventure Zone. Share it with the group. Even if you don't want to go into detail, just be like, hey, I'm having a really hard time this week. Great. We want to pray with you guys and for you guys. So make sure you're doing that. The craft, there's usually an example, so you shouldn't be in the dark for that. The game, they're usually pretty simple games. I know the kids love the games we play and they can get out of hand really easy. I try to put 2 people, if we have the staff on the game station, to help facilitate keeping the game under control. The small group activity is kind of the one that will usually the kids will, that's the boring group. So I usually try to have an activity for it or a worksheet so that it does help keep their attention. If there's a worksheet, please make sure you give it to the kids. Don't just let it be sitting there as something you reference. It's another piece they can take home. They get to talk to their parent about it. We have worked really hard, and now Kids Church, Adventure Zone, Orange and Yellow are teaching the same story, which is really exciting because that means for parents, they don't have to keep track of potentially 3 different stories, 3 different memory verses, 3 different things they need to talk about at home. Now we just have one. And it's really exciting for us as leaders to see each of the kids have a craft that they get to take home that work together. Because now you don't have kids that are like, well, you know, he learned about Jericho and they got to march around a wall and we just colored a color sheet. They all learn the same story. We're all making it interactive for everybody. So make sure that whatever the kids need to take home that we've supplied for them, make sure they're getting it. The other thing I want to talk about is inevitably we have 5 kids in the hour and a half that we have them say that they need to go to the bathroom. It's really difficult because we don't have our own restroom in this room. So the supervisors all have a radio, and we have a radio that we keep. I usually keep it up by the sound booth. It's a lot easier for you to radio the supervisor than for us to have potentially 2 or 3 workers out at any given time in a class taking kids to the restroom. So, everybody knows how a walkie-talkie works, right? I don't need to go over it. Has everybody used a walkie-talkie? I'm getting looks like some of you don't. So, they'll be turned on. You literally hold the side button while you talk. Let it go when you're done talking. So, it's really easy. So just, we'll radio, say, hey Rachel, I've got 2 kids that need to go to the restroom. Would you mind coming down here and taking them? Yep. Since we have kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, we should practically never have a kid who's literally has a bathroom emergency. There may be occasionally, but more than likely we can tell them, okay, wait a minute, somebody's coming and they'll take you. Sometimes we get kids who just want to go get a drink from the water fountain. Encourage them that they need to do that before class and after the class. Sometimes it's hard and they just want to go get one right away. That's fine, but we really want to discourage them from just leaving just to go get a drink. So kids getting picked up. So after stations are done, they go back to free play. Because we have so many kids in stations, usually there's maybe 5 minutes at this point that they're only getting for free play. Sometimes they'll go back and they'll finish their craft. Sometimes they'll want to play whatever game we were playing during our station time, and that's great. They can absolutely go back and do those things. So it'll look a lot like it does during the welcome time. One person stays at creation station, one person's over in the game area, or the game that we played for the lesson. Make sure that you're having the kids engage with you. Again, looking for people who are new or who are having a hard time. That way nobody is just sitting by themselves. I want to talk about buddies now. We do have a couple of kids who need buddies that aren't necessarily getting buddies. And that's okay, because some weeks they do really, really great and they don't need any help, and some weeks they are having a really tough day and they absolutely need somebody one-on-one with them. If you're noticing it, step up. You guys all have the ability to do that. Just be paying attention. You may end up with some kids for some weeks having 2 kids that are your buddies. And you don't have to make it a big deal. Just, you can tell them, hey, I'm going to be your buddy today. We're going to hang out. And they're going to get excited because you're an adult. Yes, some of you are youth kids, but in their eyes, you're an adult. And they're just going to be excited. And just make it fun. And just remind them gently, okay, pay attention. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Okay, don't fidget with your paper. Gentle reminders are usually all this class needs to be able to work really well. But you will have those kids that you do need to just sit down and remind. If you are noticing any kid who just really is having a hard time every single week, and you're just like, they need a one-on-one, please let myself or the supervisor know so that we can make sure, because this is just about making sure that the kids have a great experience, all the kids. And if we have a kid who is having a hard time and just wants to always be out of their seat or change seats or talk the whole time during class, that's not giving the rest of the kids a good experience because it's distracting them. So if there is a kid that you're noticing every single week, they don't have a buddy but they really need, please let us know. I'm going to transition a little bit so that we're talking about midweek as well. I know not all of you serve midweek. Actually, all of you that are in here right now serve midweek. So you guys know this. Midweek and then on Sunday nights, we usually go outside, weather permitting. So I wanted to address that. When the kids are going outside, we have them line up, and they all need to catch bubbles and ducktails, or have ducktails. We have a lot of kids that don't want to put like what they think is a bubble in their mouth. That's fine. They don't have to have their little cheeks puffed out and hold their breath, but they do need to be quiet. I don't care if they have their little hands literally behind them and walking like a little duck. They just need to have their hands to their side. They're school-age kids. They should know how to line up. We have it really easy because we literally are next to the door that's outside, so they don't have a long hall they have to go down. But I have noticed our kids are still the loudest even going down the hall, reminding them that we need to be quiet. There is usually a service or something going on in the sanctuary. Little kids are loud, and so we want to make sure that we're not disrupting the other services. They stop at the red line for the fire lane. They always do that. The other thing we need to make sure is that they're not running across the pavement. That being because we don't want them to trip. We want to make sure that we are helping them get to the grass safely, because this last Thursday, we weren't even crossing the street yet. We just had a girl trip when she was coming down off of the grass area, and she tripped and she bloodied up her knee really good. And so if they're running across the pavement, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to trip on the concrete. So make sure they walk to the grass. As soon as they get to the grass, they can go run. I think you guys all know the boundaries for where they're supposed to be, but make sure they're not going back by the little foresty area and the trees back there. We want to make sure that we're always having a count of the kids. Whenever we go outside, we always take the clipboard that has the roster. Because if there is a situation where all of a sudden the fire alarm gets pulled out, in the room or for whatever, everybody starts coming out, we need to make sure that we know what kids we have. It also will help us keep better track and make sure that we have 10 kids. Because if you don't have this, it's harder. I always count before we go out, but sometimes I'm like, oh wait, how many kids do we have? Instead of me trying to rack my brain, I can literally just look at the roster and know how many kids we have. When you're outside, make sure you're paying attention to what the kids are doing. This age is notorious for climbing on top of the slide, for climbing across the tube, for standing up on the bars and trying to walk across those. Those are obviously things that are not safe, and we don't want them to do. The other thing they like to do is they will play games and they're getting really physical, and you just want to make sure they're not shoving each other or hitting each other or any other weird things that kids like to do as games because they think it's fun, but they could actually hurt somebody. They've got a big grassy area they can go run around and play in. On Seeking Him nights, we always have bounce houses. Well, when it's not crazy hot, we're back into cooler weather, so we have bounce houses again now. So somebody needs to stay right by the bounce house because they're bouncing, they get crazy. You want to make sure that they're not getting too rough with each other. When we have a big group, we want to make sure that there's not too many kids in the bounce house. I don't have a set number for that because we get different size bounce houses each time. So check with whoever's the leader of the classroom or the supervisor to know how many kids is the max kids for the bounce house, because that's just a safety issue. They all need to take their shoes off. You guys know that to be in the bounce house. There's no bounce houses we get that they keep their shoes on. Then when we round everybody up, they get lined up. Of course, the whole big thing right now is who's the line leader. Just pick somebody. Don't make it a big deal. Just, okay, and if somebody's upset, just remind them that they can be the line leader another week. We do a count of the kids. They come in. Your lead teacher will either have a set of keys or will get the fob from the office to be able to let you back into the building. Depending on how many kids we have, what night it is, we will either take everybody to the restroom so they can go to the restroom and get a drink of water, or we will just come back in and give each kid a drink of water in the little cups and use the hand wipe so that they can get cleaned up for our snack time. The midweek lessons run a little bit differently. You guys know that no 2 Sundays look alike. Our midweek and Seeking Him services are completely different, it feels like, than our Sunday mornings. Last semester, Rachel and I led Kids Church on Wednesday nights, and it took us 3 weeks I think, to really figure out what was a good setup for how we did lesson, when we did crafts, because it's completely different. The dynamic of a Sunday morning versus kids that have, well, it was summer, so they were not really doing much, but coming in on a Sunday or a Wednesday night, it's completely different. Their attitudes are different. They get wound up differently. We found that we needed to do a little intro, our craft, worship, and then the lesson, which is completely different than how we do it on a Sunday morning. But that was what the easiest way to get the kids to pay attention to the lesson, not get wound up, because we would find that if we did the normal Sunday routine of worship, lesson, craft, they could not engage. They were crazy. So be flexible on the weeknights, that if we have to change things up, or if we have to change things up that night, just be flexible and ready to do all that. You guys are really great about, if you're like, oh, you were going to do craft, but now I really need you to hang out with this kid. You guys are all really great about doing that, and I really appreciate it. So just continue to be flexible with that. Really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions regarding anything, whether it's the lesson, stations, crafts, outside, midweeks? No? Does anybody have any comments or concerns that they've seen in the classroom or ideas? I see all of you pretty regularly, so we're usually talking about this. Yes, thank you. I did want to talk about that, because that actually brings up a different thing. You're all youth kids here today. Perfect. So we have some youth kids who are not currently workers who want to come in and hang out. I want to remind you guys, you all get paid. That means this is a job. If you were at another job and your friends came up and they wanted to hang out, that would not be allowed to happen. So, I usually let people say hi to you guys. I usually say hi to everybody, those people too. But remind them that you're working and that you'll connect with them after church. Typically, people like to congregate in the sound booth. There is one sound person assigned each Sunday, and it is on the roster in the office. Be aware, as much as we try to put you guys where you want to be, that may get changed because of the needs of the classroom. Maybe somebody called in sick, or something happened from the time that you signed up to the Thursday that they're not rosters, what are they called, Rachel? Room assignments get printed. So always check when you clock in to make sure that you are still where you think you are. If you are somebody who does sound sometimes, check to see if you're in the sound booth that day or if you're down on the floor. Because of the volume of kids we have, even if you're in the sound booth during lesson, unless I have different multimedia things that we're doing, which we are having more of, which I'm really excited of because it's helping the kids engage more. But for sure during station time, I need you on the floor, not just in the booth. Unless there's a problem, I don't need any more than one person in the sound booth. So, it's easy to congregate there, but we need to not. If you're in sound booth, be aware some of the worship songs are not EQ'd the same. I'm not sure why that is, but be aware that you may need to adjust volume between each song. The other thing is we have not figured out how to easily transition from one song to another. So if I don't have the clicker or the lead teacher doesn't have the clicker, since you're already in the sound booth, just be aware you're going to have to move from one video to the next. Because if you don't, it'll restart the same worship song. We do have a slide still that's up that we use during our prayer time. I do want to still use that after worship because we do tithe and we pray after worship still, at least a general prayer. So I want to use that slide that's normally used for the prayer groups during that time. The other thing I want to say, please memorize the memory verse. Because if we're not memorizing it, the kids aren't going to memorize it. It's typically the same memory verse for whatever series we're doing. We're finishing our series on how God is the one who rescues and helps us. Our last lesson for that is this Sunday. So it's the last time this class is going to use the Daniel 6:27 verse. So starting October, we're going to have a new verse. Memorize it. You can do it in your stations if you've completed what your activity is and you have a little bit of time before we transition. Go over the memory verse with the kids. That's a really great time to do that. You can make a game of it during welcome time or the ending time. Any other questions? Thank you, Cotton, for asking about the sound booth. I appreciate that. No other questions? Awesome. Thank you guys for coming on a Saturday. There is still coffee and lots of food, so please enjoy. Thanks.